What's going on, everybody? Jamel Gibbs, your family-oriented entrepreneur. Welcome to the Deal Pro podcast. Today, we are going to talk about if financial freedom always looks the way you think it does. And we have my man, DeAndre Clayton, who's been on my channel a number of times. You guys absolutely love the episodes that he's on. And I wanted to bring him back because I think this is at the end of the day, it's an important topic that we need to discuss. A lot of people, they get into real estate and they get into these different financial vehicles simply because they see other people doing certain things. And the question I'm going to have you guys really think about today, the question I'm going to pose to you today is this what you really want for yourself? Do you want certain things that you've seen, or is there a reason behind you wanting to literally build a completely different business model for yourself in order to create some type of financial gain? A lot of people might see things on Instagram, or you've heard me talk about this on my channel a lot, right? A lot of people see things. They're driven by what's called shiny object syndrome, right? They want all of these different things, but they're really not clear on what the end goal is for themselves. And that's what we want to draw out of you today, right? We want you to really think about your purpose. Now, I had a recent conversation with somebody that said, I just want 100 rental properties, right? When really, when we got down to the nitty gritty of it all he really wanted was $20,000 a month. And I told him, you don't need 100 properties to bring in $20,000 a month. You can have one property and do that. So if your purpose is to have $20,000 a month, then why do you need 100 rental properties? That's what we're going to provide you today on this podcast. Clarity, right? Knowing what you want, not what you see, right? What do you want personally? That's what we want to provide you with. Again, clarity with my man, DeAndre Clayton. What's up, bro?
What's up, my man? How you doing today, man?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I can't complain. So this is a topic that I think is super important for everybody to hear, man. Before we hop into it, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, man?
Okay, so DeAndre Clayton, I've been on the podcast quite a few times. More people know me for HELOCs and counseling on infinite banking, different things like that. I'm also what you call a IRMA certified planner, which really is a focus on the senior market and just making sure that some of the decisions they've made don't come back to bite them on the back end and spike their healthcare costs. And so, I'm here because in the interesting conversations I've had, I realized that most people don't really have a defined clarity as to the purpose of their decisions. They kind of have a plan, but the plans are all over the place and it's not tied to a specific purpose. So
that's right, man. So with that being said, bro, let's hop into this conversation. I think it's a super important conversation that needs to be had. A lot of people don't talk about it, but just to provide the clarity that people need, this podcast is definitely going to be helpful, I believe. And if people are paying attention, then it's going to be very valuable for people. So when you hear the term financial freedom, what do most people picture? And why do you think that image of financial freedom can be misleading for people?
So I would say when most people think of financial freedom, I don't think they really think about freedom per se. I think they think about consumerism, right? So it's more so financial freedom is tied to things I can buy, not the ability to make decisions, the comfort to make decisions. And that's probably the worst part of it is the marketing. Usually if you see something about financial freedom, you see a lot of glitz and glamour that's sold to you. So therefore you attach financial freedom with Rolls Royce. You attach financial freedom with Lamborghini. You attach financial freedom with these very expensive items, but that doesn't necessarily equal freedom. You could be slave to those things, right? So it's important to kind of gain clarity as to what does freedom look like for each individual. Now, it may look like that for some people. Some people, financial freedom is that they just want to buy whatever they absolutely want to buy. and others may have a different view. And I think most who have a different view are not being highlighted or marketed to. And I would venture to say they're the vast majority, actually.
It's interesting, man, because when I used to, so as you know, I used to work down on Wall Street when I was 19, 20 years old, early 20s up until 9/11. And one of the phrases that I heard that absolutely changed the way I thought about money and the way money works is money is a tool that allows you to experience things, right? So if you want to go to the moon, for example, you need a couple $1,000,000. If you want to go out of space, if you want to drive a Rolls Royce, you need a certain amount of income. If you just want to travel the world, it takes money, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean it provides you with the financial freedom unless you use it the right way. So again, there's a reason why people do what they do. Is it for material things, financial gain, or is it for long-term comfortability? And that's, I think that ties in nicely with what you just said. At the end of the day, I believe that money is, what you do with the money will end up, allowing you to either achieve the purpose at the end of the day or not. Just allow you to have stuff. So why was there was there ever a moment in your life where your financial situation may have shifted, or the way you thought about financial freedom? Has that ever shifted at some point in your life?
Oh man, that's very interesting. So I guess maybe there was like two shifts, but I've always been a little bit more conservative, right? So because I'm from Miami, Florida. Being too flashy could also put a target on your back too. Right? So I've never wanted to draw a lot of attention, to be honest with you, because the more attention you draw, the more people would ask for things from you. They want more from you. And so I remember that I had a friend, and he was a firefighter at the time, but we were having this conversation, and he said, "Man, I'm about to go get this Coach bag is on sale," and it was like on sale for like $200-300, but it was a backpack. Now at this time we were well out of school, right? Like we were no longer in school at all. So I was like, "Why are you getting a backpack for $200?" And so he was just like, "Hey, it's on sale." And I said, "Bro, you're a fireman. Like that's not a sale for you, right? Like just spending $200 on something that you actually don't need, it's not really a sale for you." And he just looked at me like, "No, man, I need to get it." And for me, I started realizing, I said, "Oh, this is like a thing," because it's not that the Coach in particular is providing better fabric, like that is actually built better than, another bag or something like that. But it was just the label of it made him feel so enticed, and it gave him that, feeling like, "Oh, I'm going to be, I guess, accepted," or something of that nature. And I never really bought into it per se. Now I will say, after I started making a significant amount of money more, and I never really got into labels that much unless it was something that I wanted. But there were times when it was like maybe eating out, and you start to feel like, okay, well, if I'm making this much money, I can go to Ruth Chris every day if I wanted to, right? And it's like, I could, but is that reasonable? Is it really what I like? Why am I doing that, right? I could easily make my own food at the house, or I could easily do this and, get a fine meal, one that I'll still like. But it was just something in me that was like, "Oh, I got to check this," right? Like this is not a good habit to build, just to do things because you have the ability to do them from a consumerism standpoint, because you could say, okay, well, you do that, and how much money could you have spent on something, investing to build for your future just in 1 month? If you just went to Ruth Chris every single day, how much would that cost, and what could you have done with that in a month's time, right? To build your worth, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, man. So what does financial freedom actually look like for the working professional or the busy person that's trying to get ahead in today's economy? What does financial freedom actually look like?
So I'll say this. I believe that for the average person, financial freedom, the internal thing that they don't say out loud because they kind of think of it as this consumer thing. I believe financial freedom is not being concerned about your family's well-being, knowing that no matter what, you'll be able to take care of it, knowing that if, your car has a flat, not a thought. Like you're not over, you can't turn, molehills, into mountains, so to speak, because you're like, oh, that's taken care of. And I believe that's what financial freedom actually looks like to people, but they don't know how to say that because financial freedom is dressed in luxury to them instead of dressed in, I just want to make sure my family's straight. And I think most people, that's really just what it is. They just want to make sure the family's straight. I always tell people on appointments, although I deal with wealthy people a lot, I don't call myself a wealth advisor. And they're like, what? What do you mean? And I said, because in reality, most people never want to be poor.
Mm-hmm.
There's more of a likening to not wanting to be poor than there is to wanting to be rich. And you can tell that most people would prefer not to be poor than prefer to be rich because of the thought process. You know what I'm saying? And so I always tell people, like, let's make sure that we put you on a road to never actually having to suffer and feel pain. More so, you can reach out for riches, but it can cause pain.
I definitely think that's factual, man. At the end of the day, I don't think people care about being rich so much as they care about being comfortable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that most people, they don't want to be in a spotlight and they just want to have enough to take care of their family and their circumstances. There's some people out there that's a little more ambitious and they want what's called generational wealth, which is a term that's become popular over the last few years.
Overused.
But definitely overused. Definitely. And then the meaning behind it,
right,
being just torn to pieces. But the whole point is most people just want to live a good life, man, and be comfortable and just not have to suffer, like you said. So with that in mind, with all of the issues that we're facing, because, we have economic issues right now. People are really suffering right now. We got job loss, things like that that's actually happening. What would financial freedom look like for the average person?
So, financial freedom may need to be adjusted for you in this particular time if you have always based it on luxury. So when you realize that things have inflated so much, luxury things have inflated too. Now they were well overinflated a long time ago, but they'll continue to overinflate as things continue to cost more. So focusing on what your purpose is as opposed to what you want it to look like is where you'll find that home of what financial freedom is.
Absolutely, man. And a lot of people, they feel stuck. They feel scared right now, right? So how should that uncertainty affect how they pursue financial freedom then?
Good question. Good question. So, we've been on podcasts talking about a lot of these different tools, and the tools that I promote are control heavy tools, right? They're tools that, hey, everything is in your hands. You can do what you want to do with them. And I do that intentionally because I want people to be better stewards of their money. I think that the way that America has set up making money, I guess, especially when you talk about the hyper, I don't even want to say it this way, but it's almost an over sexualization of the market, right? Where people are so enticed by the market that their faith in the market is larger than it is in their God, right? They just know if no ifs, ands, or but. I need to do this. I need to do this. And it is a glorified way of gambling. Like, we're not going to sugarcoat it because it lacks your own control. The only thing you can control there is your emotions, right? And that becomes harder and harder the older you get when you know you need to live off of the money, right? And so I think first it's, once again, kind of bringing it back to norms and saying, okay, I have needs and I have wants. What are my real needs and what are my real wants? Are my wants adjusted because of how I want people to view me? Right? Like, okay, I make a good amount of money, right? But whatever car I decide to purchase has nothing to do with anybody.
No way.
Like, I don't think about, oh, well, you know, I like this car. Well, I don't like it because the other people in my bracket, they're driving these, you know. It's irrelevant to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, you know, when you talk about, like, probably the king of financial freedom would be somebody like Warren Buffett. And it's amazing that when I look at somebody like Warren Buffett, his example is so content with what he wants. Mm-hmm. He does not care nothing about how anybody else views him. And you see this with a lot of billionaires, actually. A lot of billionaires, like the guy who used to own Zappos, I think he passed, but he owned the largest shoe distributor online and only owned maybe about 3 or 4 personal pairs of shoes. Right? If you look at Facebook, when, you know, Tom, yeah, your man from Facebook really only had white tees and jeans. Mm-hmm. Like, he didn't change what he was wearing. And so the concept for a lot of those who, and I'm not saying that this is what anybody should be fully, but what they're doing is saying, I'm so focused on what my purpose is, I could care less how I look to other people in this time. And right now, you need to care less about your surroundings, how people look at you, in order to have financial freedom.
That's interesting, man, because, you know, I call Warren Buffett Mr. F-150, man, because he's a multi-billionaire driving a regular pickup truck, man, eating McDonald's every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, I have a friend, his name is Scott, and I learned something from him. He's another real estate investor, educator, but he focuses on slow flips. But I learned something from him not so well, a few years back, about 10 years ago. He said, you know, at one time he was driving a really expensive car, something that he wanted, but all of his private money lenders that were lending him money came in a Honda Accord, right? So he was like, at the end of the day, you know, he said something is wrong with this picture. Mm-hmm. You know, he said, you know, if they're lending me money, and, you know, obviously it depends on how you look at the money borrowing as well, because I could have $100 million in the bank. I'm still going to borrow money. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's just true.
But in his case, he was driving a $120,000 vehicle, and he said, hey, you know, if they're pulling up in a Honda Accord, then something is wrong with this picture. I need to get rid of this car. Right. Mm-hmm. So then he said, next thing you know, he had a Honda Accord. He's been driving it ever since. And I'll be honest with you, man, I had some really nice cars in my life. I got some nice cars now. But that, you know, back in 2018, I went to the Honda dealership and I bought a brand new Honda Accord and a brand new Honda Pilot the same day. Unfortunately, the Honda Pilot didn't fit the whole family, so I had to trade that out after a year. But I love that Honda Accord, man. I love that Honda Accord. And I wanted to keep it, but I just got rid of it. And it was probably something I regretted. You know, I do love my Porsche. I got, you know, a couple of nice cars and stuff, but if I would go back to the Honda, I would be satisfied with it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So that's just right in line with what you were saying, man. I appreciate you bringing that up. So what are some underrated tools or strategies that people can use to build financial freedom, to buy back their time without having a big budget right now, man?
Right. So So first and foremost, and I'll say this, we talk about the first lien HELOC and how much freedom that it gives people. And I want to say
Mm-hmm.
this specifically to those who are like federal employees who are being laid off. If you have a fear that it might happen, apply for a first lien HELOC today,
Mm-hmm.
because the feeling of the crunch that's around you will definitely drop if you have the ability to live off of it for some time until you get back on your feet. But don't, and I want to highlight this because people call me all the time. I want to get a first lien HELOC. They just left their job. Don't call me if you just left your job.
No, and that's factual. People make bad decisions. Like people come to me and say, "Hey, I want to get into real estate. I want to quit my job." And I'm
No,
like, "Do not quit your job. Your
no,
job is actually your first private money lender. You
that's
don't leave sure income for hopeful income, man. You just don't
don't
do that. Not
don't
smart."
leave it. Don't leave it. So that's the first thing that I'll say. First lien HELOCs are great for that. Right now, the insurance policies and everything, they're fantastic too. People who have them already are not feeling the same crunch that most of you are feeling, quite
True.
frankly. And I don't want to say it that way, but it just is what it is. Now, the other thing that I'll say is open your mind to different business models that might not be as popular too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't know what my background is. My background actually isn't real estate. My background, I started in the financial industry and then I shifted to Medicare. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if my income or my passive is close to 10 off of 3 years, a lot of you would die to have 10 of passive income. And you
Mm-hmm.
have to think about what you're taking on to get that. So that's the reason why I say know why you want certain things and not just simply the look of it. Because there could be a person whose goal is, hey, I want to get 10,000 in income, and it's very doable in Medicare with much less money spent than real estate.
Mm-hmm.
If we're just being honest, it really is.
Yeah.
And so it's like, because that's more the grit, stick to itiveness and really getting out there and helping seniors and stuff like that. Um, but I would say that that's one thing. Open your mind up to different things that may not be as sexy. Medicare ain't sexy.
At all, man. But
It's
it
not sexy,
pays.
right? But it pays, right? And so the thing is though, is that even if something isn't sexy per se, what you need to view as sexy is something predictable,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the spontaneity of things makes people really, really excited. But when you got a family and you got people that you need to feed, if there
That's
is a way to get consistency, you should probably seek that out. And that's not just, a job. That could be you starting a business that would be something that everybody needs. If it's a truck driving business, if it's think about what's going on right now, what's happening in your area, tariffs, this, that, and try to take time and sit down and say, what's a thing that's needed right now?
mm-hmm.
What is a thing that's needed right now, and how can I help people get what they need? Because that's how you always make more money,
That's
so
excellent, man. And it's just like you said about having that open mind. You know what I mean? I think right now, number one, to me, it's always a good time to get involved in real estate, but how you approach the game
how you
needs to
approach
be
it.
adjusted. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So I think now if you have something that's working for you, bringing in some money, wholesaling is a great way, but it's a hustle, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a hustle. Most people don't want to put in the effort it takes to wholesale real estate. And when they do, it can still fall short because you still gotta, there's so many wholesalers out here. You still gotta put forth even more effort to get the same
Mm-hmm.
result,
Yeah.
right? Um, Most people get into real estate for the idea of passive income, which comes through buying rental properties. It's not about wholesaling. It's not about fixing and flipping all the time. Sometimes it truly is about you just being in a position to go out and buy some rental real estate. But if you have, like you said, insurance, for example, if you have that type of vehicle that can help you to achieve the rental property portfolio that you're looking for, you can have both the passive income from, let's say, insurance, as well as the passive income from real estate combined. It just makes things a lot easier when you have more than one income source that you can tap into. So when things like this happen in advance, and you're ready in advance, it won't really affect you.
Yeah.
So going back to that first lien HELOC situation, you said most people with a first lien HELOC, they're not really struggling like most people are right now.
Yeah, they're not feeling the same crunch.
Now, how long we've been talking about first lien HELOCs on this channel, man?
Multiple
years.
It's been a
We've
hot.
been warning people. You know what I mean? It's not brand new on this channel. It's been several years we've been talking about it.
Yeah.
But who's taking action?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's not too late. I'm not saying that everything is dead in the water right now. No. There's still opportunities. Where there's a problem, there's an opportunity. That's the way you got to think. And that's what DeAndre was saying.
Yeah.
So look at your local area, see what's needed. Can you provide that?
Yeah. Can you provide it? Can you provide it? And sometimes the answer might come in a package that you're not used to. Be open to, anything, right? So I was telling Jamel earlier about a client, and I run across this scenario all the time, especially because market values have dropped so much that people are afraid, quite frankly. They're being let off, and not only are they being let off, but they're losing money in the market at the same time, which they thought they would be living off of. And I remember having this conversation with a client. He had quite a bit of money, maybe about maybe like $500,000 or something like that, right? And so, I'm looking over his portfolio, and I'm like, okay, so what is it that you need? What is it that you want to happen with this money? Oh, I want to use it for income. Okay, all right. So I could build you together a contractual guarantee of $45,000 a year for the rest of your life. Is that going to be enough? Because you have how much that you really want to make. Oh, I want to make $10,000 a month. Okay, so if you want to make $10,000 a month, and I'm building together something to close $45,000 a year of your gap, that's going to be really helpful, right? Because you're almost there anyways. You're not that far. You're about $2,000 off. So I knew that I would put him right in a position he'd be in pocket. His question was, well, but how much money can I make in the market? Like, what's the interest that I can gain on that money? And I was so floored, and I was like, bro, what are you going to do with the money if you gain interest? Oh, I'm going to use it for income. Okay, so if I'm solving for income first, why are you asking me how much interest you're going to gain and still have it in the market, like still have the possibility of loss? And that's what I mean by the over-sexualization of it. You should not be more enticed by a possibility of growth, knowing that there's also a possibility of loss, than it is of, hey, I make $10,000 a month, and whatever this solution is that he's presenting, it's going to close my gap, and I'm probably going to be making $11,000 a month by the time he's done, right? Pick that. That makes more sense. And if you want to make more money, invest then with the guaranteed stuff that you have, right? So there's an old saying that old folks used to say, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush.
Yep.
Right? And it's about being content with the thing that you actually have purposed. What's your purpose?
It's funny because I had a recent situation. Well, I have an active situation right now. I'm looking to purchase a roller skating rink, and it's a $3 million opportunity, and I can literally buy this thing with no money out of pocket. Right. So after we work the numbers and we go through everything, I'm still going to be in a positive cash flow of like $5,000 or $6,000 a month. Right. So that's paying me $60,000 to $72,000 a year. So I had somebody look at the numbers, and they're like, 60 to $72,000 a year. Ain't that thing bringing in $45,000 a month? And I said, it is. They said, so how can you be happy with $5,000 or $6,000 a month off of that? I said, how much money do I have out of pocket? The purpose of it is to add more income to my bottom line. I don't have to necessarily work for that income. That's after paying everybody. And he couldn't see the bigger picture. And I'm like, you got to look at it from a different standpoint. My ROI is infinite on this. I don't have any money tied into it. And I'm basically making somebody's annual salary just because I buy the business. So it's how you look at things and how you perceive them as being valuable to you. Because I could say, okay, I could take all of this money and go flip it up and make, boatloads of money and stuff. But the point of me getting this business is to bring in more revenue, add it to my bottom line, more passive income.
That's it.
It just makes sense. And some people just, they can't fathom, they don't understand the concept behind that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So you say your purpose, it obviously, the things that you do in business, you want to be clear on what you want, right? Mm-hmm. And that's going to drive how you should move, how you should navigate in your business. So can you break that down for people who might feel a little off track with that?
Right. So, and I think you kind of did this a little bit earlier with, if what you want is $10,000 a month, right? Your viewpoint of it might have naturally been that you need to have 50 houses, right? So, but if you were able to say, okay, well, what if I did one house and the one house was a living facility and I transformed it into a living facility and it netted me $10,000 a month? Be satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so it means being stuck to what is the overall purpose rather than the plan to get to the purpose. Because the reason why you never hear about purpose A, purpose B, purpose C, purpose D is because it doesn't exist. Purpose doesn't change. Plans do. That's why you hear plan A, plan B, plan, right? And so people are being married to plans and they're being married to or they're having sentimentality to the plan. And they have no sentimentality to what the plan is supposed to actually do, which is the purpose of the whole thing. And so whenever you build out rather a business plan or you're doing anything, realize that there is a bottom line for why you're doing it.
Right.
And if it becomes more difficult to reach that bottom line with the plan you have, don't be sentimental. Get rid of the plan. Pivot. Change. It is what it is. You have to be willing to do it. Otherwise, you're just going to leak money.
Change can be scary for people, especially when they got their heart and mind set on certain things. But just to add to what you were saying, at the end of the day, I think the plan can change once people start seeing the money because it provides a certain level of comfortability that you think might be there. Example, a basketball player, most basketball players, most athletes are broke within 5 years after they retire.
Absolutely.
Right? Because they think that money is going to last forever, right? There's a 1% of the LeBron James, for example. I can't see. He's a billionaire off of basketball. I can't see him being broke in 5 years. And plus he has all these endorsements, investments, and other things like that. Most people, it's not happening for most athletes like that. So I think you might have a plan, let's say to get to 20,000 a month, but then along the line of you building up to that plan, you see this that you want to buy, and you see that you want to buy, and you're not staying focused on the target, which is getting to 20,000 a month and staying within your means. You're taking on more debt as time goes on, and that causes you to prolong how much time is going to take for you to get to your end goal. So I think that happens to a lot of people. They're fascinated by what they can buy with the money right now, not about thinking long term. I can always get that later. But people don't realize the older you get, the harder it is to make the same kind of money. A friend of mine, he recently said this, and I 100% agree with it. He said, most people in their 50s and 60s are not going to make the same kind of money that they made in their 30s and 40s,
Mhm.
or 20s and 30s even, because, even in your 40s, it's going to be it's going to be your body, your
Yeah.
energy level ain't
Stuff
there.
changes. Yeah,
I'm
stuff.
44 years old, man. I work out, I keep myself fit. I try to, keep moving, and I still can't do what I did 10 years ago. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I'm old by any stretch of the word. I'm still pushing.
Right.
But what I'm
He said,
saying
"Don't
is,
call me now. Don't."
yeah, no, don't
Yeah,
sleep.
yeah, that has some clarity on that.
But what I'm saying is 10 years ago, when I was really in my prime, or 20, 15 years ago, whatever it was, I think I'm in my prime now, really. But if we're talking 10 years ago, my energy level was just different. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? It was
charts. Yeah,
it was just there, man. And I still got that type of energy now because I keep myself in that position. But most people is not going to happen for like that. The average person. That's what
Mhm.
I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? So I think that people need to understand when to pivot, and they need to, really stay on a beating path of what their end goal is in order to really be able to achieve what they want. Once they hit the goal, now they can look at their circumstances. They can
Yeah,
heighten their goal if they
absolutely.
want. They can, whatever it is, you can make adjustments, but get to your goal first.
Yeah.
And you got to have the vehicles in order to be able to do that. So if somebody's listening and they're tired of chasing the wrong version of freedom, where should they start, bro?
Start with understanding the value of stability.
Mm,
Start with understanding that um, a luxury does not equate to happiness.
mm,
We buy
powerful.
a lot of things, and then we want more things, right?
Yep.
Like I remember, if so, one of my guilty pleasures. I am a fragrance snob, right? I buy high end fragrances, and they cost a lot, right? Some of them 400, 500, right? It can go all the way up to $1,000, right? But my first time buying one, it didn't make me like, oh man, I finally got a high end fragrance. I'm never going to buy another one again. I still want to smell different things, right? And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what luxury does. Luxury expands you wanting to be more of a consumer. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying that a piece of you shouldn't be okay with consuming things. Sure, no problem. That's the way of the world. But
And
your
enjoy it.
whole life should not be about what you can purchase, what you can get next. Because when inflation goes up, a luxury lifestyle goes up.
Hmm.
And you'll start to realize, oh, hold on, dang, oh, these things, I can't take care of it no more, right?
Hmm.
And so, don't do things for others. Do it for you. Do it for your family. And that'll be the first step. Of course, if you need to tighten your belts right now, don't be ashamed to tighten your belts. You got to do what you got to
Gotta
do.
do what you gotta do, man.
You got to do what you got to do, right?
Right.
So because you need to live another day, you need to be able to weather a storm so that you can build again. Building in rain does not make that much sense.
That's right.
It's rain, storm.
It's slippery, man.
It's slippery out here. So if you need to conserve yourself in this time, learn how to do that. If you need to
Yeah.
make better decisions, fine, make better decisions. But don't make decisions based off of what you want things to look like. Make decisions based off of what you want it to feel like.
I love that, man. And if I had to leave you guys with this, I want to add something to that. I heard somebody say this one time. They said, when, especially when it comes to finances, but life in general, you go through seasons just like the weather. You got the winter time, you got the
Mhm.
summertime, you got the spring, you got the fall, right? They said right now we might be going through the winter where, people are trying to figure it out. The economy is not where you want it to be. Your income, people are scared right now.
Mhm.
There's turmoil, there's blood in the streets right now,
Mhm.
right? But this is the time to really build. This is the time to get smart, learn, maybe invest into yourself a little bit.
Here, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
You got to get smart.
Get
You got to
skilled.
understand what's going on. And you got to start slowly building, because you start planting these seeds. Eventually the spring, what happens after the winter? You have the spring.
Yeah.
Right? The spring is stuff start to blossom. So if you're planting the seeds now, when you get to the spring, which you'd be surprised how quickly spring comes. How many of you can really relate to there being winter and then right around the corner, you're like, man, it was just cold outside, now it's warm. Right here in North Carolina, we got about 6 weeks of a real winter, and then warm weather after that, right?
Yeah.
So when the spring come around, stuff start to blossom, right? And then those seeds that you plant, it will start being, you start being fruitful. And then the summer comes and then you full force.
Yeah.
But then during the summer, what do you want to do? You want to stock up, because that fall is coming, and then that winter is eventually, it's going to keep going around in circles and circles, right? So be smart. Right now is the winter for a lot of people, not for everybody, but for a lot of people.
For a lot of folks. Yeah.
Start planting those seeds, start getting smarter, invest into your education, invest into being able to take more action.
Audible.
That's it, man. Audible, man.
Even if it's just Audible, 2 books a month.
Yeah, man.
Increase your attention span. That's why you struggle so much. Because the moment you start trying to think, you can't zone into anything because you're always zoned out.
Focus on one thing.
Increase your attention span.
That's right.
So
blinders.
Those are things that I would just say is like invaluable, especially in this type of time. And of course, look at the last podcast I was featured on. It was a macroeconomic podcast, probably one of the most detailed layouts of everything that actually ended up happening.
Yep.
So
that's a fact, man. That's an actual fact, because we had a conversation.
I told exactly what was going to happen on the last podcast, and it was probably the least watched, but it was the most informational. It's the most informative. So don't be scared of information. Like, it doesn't always have to be glitz, glam, boom, bop, boom. I'm looking now, and even though like editing is great, it seems like people can't even listen to a video without seeing words come across the screen in a fancy way. Like, no, you need to be looking deep for things now. This is not surface time. Right.
Love it, man. So if our listeners wanted to get in contact with you, man, how can they do that?
Oh, man, ClaytonFinancialSolutions.com. Always go there. I will be starting a podcast fairly soon. Hopefully within the next month or two, I'll start filming and doing a couple different things. But the premise of that will be more so geared just towards overall finances, right? So disability, estate planning, tax strategies, different stuff like that, that a lot of people are just not really following correctly. I have a Voltron on my team, so I have CPAs, I have lawyers, I have a lot of different folks I can refer out if you need help, if you need advice about things. So feel free to reach out. No man can be an island. I know it seems like I know a lot. I don't know as much as everybody around me. Everybody around me knows a ton, and they build me up. So I have no problem pushing others in that direction to help them get what they need.
And that's really the way it should be, man. Now, if you had to provide our listeners with some last words of advice on this particular topic, what would it be?
I would say that the binder of the book is always probably the most boring part of a book. However, it keeps the pages together, right? So when we talk about purpose and when we talk about plans, the plans are on the pages, but the purpose is the binder. Focus on what this book is supposed to actually be about. That is your life, your financial strategies and everything. It needs to be centered around things that are in line with your ethics, are in line with your common sense, are in line with what does make sense to you and that you can do. I feel it's so important to teach people psychologically what's in line with them as opposed to what is a generic view of what's the right decision financially. There is no right decision financially. I hate to say that. There's only a few things that actually do fit. Don't spend more than what you make, right? But as far as what you invest in and all that kind of stuff, there is no absolute right decision. Everybody's finances is like their DNA. Each of you are different. Each of you have different backgrounds. Your parents taught you different things about money. Your spouse has a different view of money than you do. And lastly, don't allow money to divide you as a family.
So if this episode challenged your thinking or helped you to see your goals more clearly, do us a favor, share this with as many people as possible. Share this with people who might benefit from it. Leave a comment. Let us know below what else you would like to see, on this podcast. I want to bring DeAndre back. He's obviously a frequent guest on this channel, and we always have a great topic to discuss because you guys provide us with the ideas behind what you want to hear. So remember, guys, freedom doesn't always look like early retirement. It doesn't always look like a fancy car. Sometimes it might just be picking up your kids from school, having the ability to do that. Sometimes it just might be, having the ability to take a deep breath, especially when times are hard. Everybody goes through those winter times. Everybody has a struggle at some point in their life. But if you're in a position to be able to step back for a second and say, hey, I need to take a break, sometimes that's what financial freedom looks like. It's not about the material things all the time. It may not be early retirement for you all the time, but the point is you got to keep building what you want your life to look like. And that's what this podcast episode was all about. What's your purpose? Know what your end goal is and having the right vehicle for you to be able to get there. Sometimes that vehicle could change. Sometimes you might have to pivot. You have to, move, right to left a couple of times, going between the traffic, but eventually you're going to end up at that destination. The point is knowing how you're going to get there and knowing what that destination is and be willing to be in the driver's seat to be able to drive that vehicle. So I really hope that you guys appreciated this podcast. We appreciate you watching and listening. I hope you guys benefited from it, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.